Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Bold You, a show that is dedicated to inspiring every person out there. And yes, I am talking about you to play bigger in your life, because I promise you that you can. To be bolder, which means you're going to have to step out of your comfort zones. You're going to have to talk about things that are uncomfortable for you. You're going to have to do things that are uncomfortable for you, because that's where success happens, is in action. So you can become the best version of you. I believe that we live in a world where there is a war between good and evil, and the only way evil wins is when good people don't do enough. So every week we have incredible topics. We have incredible guests to really build you up, to lift you up, to inspire you to do more, to be more, and to really bless this world with your greatness. Now, today is going to be an incredible show, and I am so excited to talk about our subject matter, but I'm even more excited to bring on our special guest, Mr. Bruce Pulver. He is a speaker, an author, and an encourager. And believe me, he is all three of those. And he's coming to us out of Atlanta, Georgia. So Bruce, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jen, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to have you on the show. And you know, before we just dig into all this juicy information that you have in your book, please tell us just a little bit about you.
Well, I live in Atlanta, as you said. I've been in Atlanta since the early 80s. I grew up on the west coast of Florida, down in the Tampa Bay area, and made a 4-year stop in Tallahassee at Florida State University, and married with 2 daughters, a beautiful wife and 2 daughters, 21 and 18. One's about ready to graduate and go on to her doctorate in physical therapy, and the other is about to graduate from high school, and she's going to go on to play some soccer at college. So
right.
We're excited.
She's going to the University of Georgia, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, you know, we got to give a shout out to the dogs. My husband, that's his alma mater, and we actually have a place there in Atlanta as well. But, you know, one of the things I love so much about you is you're so transparent about, you know, all your journeys in life, everything that you've done. So before we get into the book, I mean, what are some of those I call them moments of truths, where you had a situation, an incident, you've got a mentor, you've got a person that made such an impact on your life that it really changed the trajectory of your life? I mean, can you share with us some of those moments?
Well, sure. I think from a mentor perspective, I was very fortunate to be raised in a very loving family, mother, father, and older brother. So I would say probably, you know, both my mother and my father, we'll get into that, I think, a little bit later, were probably 2 of the most influential people in my life. But also in the little town I grew up in the Tampa Bay area, we were so fortunate to have both amazing sports programs growing up and amazing music programs. And so my little hometown, I was able to actually participate in both. So I must also say that many of the music influences, music teachers, private teachers, band directors, you know, as well as many of the coaches, whether it was baseball or tennis, just, you know, I was blessed to be around a lot of folks who really wanted to help others, you know, develop and grow. So that really influenced me a lot.
You know, and I think it's so important because, you know, every month in 2019, we are doing a book of the month. And actually, what I said in January, we started with Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And you just can't even do it justice in 1 month. So we actually decided that we were going to do a book every 2 months. And our book this month that we're reading is John C. Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I've actually, you know, I'll tell you what this is right here. This is my Napoleon Hill statement that I'm working on. But every week I like to pull out a point. And the point this week that I wanted to pull out was, one of the things that John C. Maxwell talks about with leadership is real leaders talk about not just things that are of value to them, but they invest in people and they're interested in people because they want to pull out the value in other people. And when I was going through this, I said, oh my gosh, this fits Bruce perfectly, because you sincerely are a leader. And one of the things you do is you are committed to pulling out the value in people. And I want you to talk about where that philosophy came from in your life.
Well, I mean, probably maybe going back to some of the things as a kid. You can't win a baseball game without a team. You can't complete the symphony, or I was very much involved in jazz music. You really can't have a musical conversation in a group without trying to make everyone around you better. And a lot of the players, whether it were musicians or athletes that I was fortunate to be with, I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the most skilled musically, but I was around players who tried to make everyone better. Mm-hmm. And I kind of look to that as that's how everyone rises, is when there's an encouragement factor there that allows everyone to reach their best.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things. My dad was a professional tennis player, and he went, he played tennis, went to the University of Oklahoma on a tennis scholarship, played afterwards, played all of the big tennis tournaments. And then he went back to the University of Oklahoma and actually was the tennis coach there for a while. And he said to me very early on in life, he said, it's not the most talented athletes, it's not the most talented musicians. It's not about talent. It's about hard work, providing value, and really being others centered instead of self-centered, which to me speaks to your book. And before we start talking about the book, Above the Chatter, Our Words Matter. I mean, I've got the book right here in studio, but there it is on the screen. I want to really start with the clip that you have from your TED Talk, because I think that is a perfect introduction to everything that we're going to discuss the rest of the show.
Fantastic.
Have you ever thought about how much your words matter? I'm a word junkie. I'm fascinated by words, not because of their spelling or their sound or how we use them in the English language. So, not because PH sounds like F, not because we have to have K to spell the word knife correctly, and not because we have 3 ways to say the word there. They're there, over there, in their chair. And not because when my wife and I are cooking, and she asks me to go get the Baileys, and when I come back from the liquor cabinet, she directs me to the spice cabinet because she wanted Baileys, not Baileys.
When and how this fascination with words started with you?
Yeah, well, so I kind of go on in the talk and tell a little bit of that story. My dad was really a wordsmith. He's a great writer. He wrote plays. He loved to do crossword puzzles, and words were always in some form or fashion involved in our house. And he had this rule for crossword puzzles that he preferred that you do all the crosswords before you start down. So his vocabulary was incredible. He loved to look at words and kind of break them down. I didn't really understand why that kind of oozed into my being, but we were always doing plays on words, or that sort of thing. Now, probably the last person who thought I would write a book would have been my English teachers in high school, because I think what translated or what we did at home didn't necessarily translate well to school. But There was always something about just the assembly of letters and how kind of what makes up a word and how they can sound different ways and be spelled different ways. And that's sort of how I sort of introduced the TED Talk was, it's always been there, but I really didn't understand why until, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when, the book sort of started out as a journal and started growing. We could talk more about that.
Right. Well, and we want to. When you send a book to somebody, and I know if they go on your website, and your website is above the chatter, Our Words Matter, because that's the name of your book. I know that you were mentioning that if somebody orders a book directly from the website, you will sign it. Well, let me tell you what you put in my book. It says, Jens, a single word can change a life. And I love that because, one of the things that I am really committed to this year is at least one of my shows every month. I'm going to talk about mental health awareness because our words can change people's lives for good and for bad. And I want people to hear your story, how the book did come about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And so like everybody, you kind of are going through life and, you have various ups and downs during your career, during your school, during relationships, et cetera. And for me, after about 25 years in the healthcare technology and services business, I had a sudden change and the company went in a different direction and laid off several people in the company, and I was one of them. I call that my BAM moment. And that's where everything's going fine beforehand, and then bam, all of a sudden, something in your life changes. And for me, it was a job. But, it can really be anything. It can be a relationship. It can be a diagnosis. It can be an accident. And for me, I woke up the day after this layoff occurred, just, I guess, laying in the bed there for a matter of a couple of minutes after I woke up. And you can show the cover of the book, above the chatter, Our Words Matter. There was a single word that was kind of repeating itself in my head, and that word was strong. And I looked at it, I wrote it vertically, and then I wrote a verse for every letter in the word, which became stand tall, remain optimistic, now go for it. So in that moment, I really didn't put it all together that the combination of, being around a family like I described, or my dad's fascination with words, really was anything but, gee, there's a word, Bruce, go and you better be strong today. You've got to get through, you've got to figure out how to take this potential tragedy or setback or devastation, which it was for me, and try to make the most of it. And so that was the first word. And that day I tried my best to go find something that I could be, that made me or made me feel strong. And I don't even remember what it was I did that day. But the next day, another word, same time, came into my mind, and it was the word great. And I simply wrote it vertically, and great became get ready, GR, expect, a terrific day. So GREAT, get ready, expect a terrific day. So that's sort of the starting point of how this all got going as really a journal. They just kept at the same time, another word would come in my mind in the morning. I'd look at it, concentrate, and try to focus on it as a way to kind of build my confidence or build my strength back. After 25 years of feeling like you're relatively successful at something, or your health is fine, and all of a sudden you get this diagnosis or a great relationship sort of turns sideways. My situation was a job, and I just was given the gift of these words just started coming to me every morning.
Well, so I think there's some great lessons that you're saying right now. And number one is you weren't planning on getting laid off. You weren't planning on writing a journal. You weren't planning on having these words come to you on a daily basis every morning, but it happened. And it continued to happen, and it continued to happen. And then you acted upon what you are receiving. And I think that is so true. So many times people will have an idea and they will listen to that idea and they listen to it and they listen to it and they do no action whatsoever. They just think, why am I having this exact same idea every day or every week or once a month or twice or 3 times a year? It's because it's inspiration specific for you and you are supposed to act on it. So I love it that you immediately acted on it the very first day, number one. And then I think it's also important that we realize when things happen to us in our lives that initially we might think this is horrible. You know, it's nobody wants to lose their job. Nobody wants to be laid off. Nobody wants to have a disease or an illness. Nobody wants to have troubles with their relationships, but sometimes it's during those situations where we are refined and we're supposed to become stronger and we're supposed to learn lessons. And one of the things I'm fascinated with the whole book, I mean, the way that you have it written and the format is incredible, but even your title, tell us, how did you pick that title, Above the Chatter, Our Words Matter?
Well, so you sit back and you just, if you just sit back and listen, there's an awful lot of noise. And I'm not judging it, but I'm just saying whether it's news or it's current events or it's economic struggles or it's, flat tires on the way to work or it's, it doesn't matter. I just felt like there's a lot of noise out there. Mm-hmm. And I found that by focusing on this gift I was given, every day, focus on that word. And to me, it wasn't a sentence or a paragraph. I mean, it was a single word. Mm-hmm. Like one of them is, we all have gifts, and gifts was God installed features to share, GIFTS. It was just a simple way for me to say, wow, Bruce, you've got something here. It's devastating. It's, you've lost it, whatever. But you have gifts. So it just was a way for me to sort of get my head around it and sort of stay as positive as I could.
Well, one of the things I think about is, to your point, you said there's a lot of noise out in the world, and there's so much noise out in the world, and most of the noise, doggone it, it's negative. I mean, it's negative, and our minds are actually made to be attracted to that negativity. Just like the ground is wired for weeds, our brain is wired for negativity. So we have to fight to put positive things into our heads. And there's a saying where you've got some people that are talking about the weather, some people talk about people, and other people talk about solutions, and they talk about ideas, and they talk about their gifts and other people's gifts, and they talk about how to make the world a better place. And to me, that's exactly what you did when you said above the chatter, because there is a lot of negative chatter out there, and we have to realize that our words really do make an impact, especially for people that are struggling with self-esteem issues or self-worth issues or depression and things like that. Literally, one word or a phrase of words or the way you structured your book can change. So change a person's life, sincerely. But tell everybody how you structured the book, because I think it's like no other book I've ever picked up and started to read.
Well, thank you. And I will. Let me back up for 1 second, though, on that chatter, because I want to make one other point, and that is that a good amount of that, I find, is between our two ears.
Absolutely.
So I meant that as well, that you're right. There's this draw towards, negativity, and sometimes that's just fear or flight. It's protection. It's a way to cover up a vulnerability sometimes by not reaching out or stepping out to do something and maybe predicting the worst possible outcome. I'm no good at this. I don't know how to dance, or I can't hit a golf ball, or I'm slow at reading, so I'm not going to read books. All of that is also what I meant in the chatter. So
Absolutely.
On that piece. But the way this sort of came together, again, it was never intended up front to be a book. it was a daily journal that once I kind of got to 3 days, then 5 days, then 35 days, and then, oh my gosh, this thing is just, it became this expectant morning process for me. I ended up with a journal that just had them, listed in a top front first day to last day. So what I really tried to be was intentional with figuring out groups that would make up meaningful chapters. So we ended up with 16 different chapters in the book that sort of allowed me to take those 400 messages and get them into categories that had some I guess generalized meaning that they would kind of fit. Well, there's ones on leadership. There's one on recharging the batteries. I wrote every day of the week. I wrote every month of the year. So January through December, there's a message for each month. So that's how I tried to organize it. And instead of making it a novel or something you'd read cover to cover, often folks will tell me they just let it fall open one morning, and that's the word, and it was a word they needed that day, which is kind of amazing, actually, that happens. But that's, I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but that's kind of how it came together. It was more of, let's take the gift of these words that have been given to me for over a year every single morning and try to make some common sense of how they should be structured together.
Right. And, to your point about just opening up the book, so he does. He's got 16 or 18, what'd you say, 16 chapters. And my two most favorite chapters are number 8, which is back to the basics, character, values, and faith, because I think that it's so important that we focus on character and what character is and values. What are the values that you live your life by? Because at the end of the day, people are making decisions based on what they value more than anything else. And faith. I love that you talk about faith. And what you'll do is you find this book, you open it up, you decide what chapter or if you want to read cover to cover. But just for an example, he does you do a great job with, at the very beginning of each chapter, you kind of summarize the chapter, and then you start in this chapter with the word heart. And it's you wrote, I believe if we live our life with our heart, our head will put us on the right path. And you break heart down as harness our true passion, embrace it with purpose, aim high, shoot higher, remember, never settle, trust that determination, effort, and time will get us to our goals. And I'm telling you, just that right there, the word, the way that you structured the book, that's a powerful punch that somebody can write about, can think about, can ponder about, and can really put somebody in a totally different headspace. And I just think it's amazing. And my second chapter is unique, and he spells it Y-O-U, Nique, N-I-Q-U-E, and then it's thank God no one else is like you. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you organized this, because we were talking beforehand, and to your point, you said there wasn't any order, you just wrote down the words. And how did you put it in order? What was that process like?
Well, it was probably 2 full days at a coffee shop where I had them, and I said, okay, I'd written some things about, values, and whether that was integrity, whether it was being intentional, whatever the word was that came out of the phrase was that I'd written that day. And I said, okay, from a values perspective, what words speak to me that makes sense for a general chapter? Mm-hmm. So under unique, quite honestly, having 2 daughters and being blessed with, the ability to be around them and see how awesome and amazing their lives are growing to become. I started writing this book when they were both teenagers, and during that time, it's difficult for all of us. I can kind of remember when I was a teenager, but it's kind of, those memories are kind of fading. But
I can't believe you were difficult as a teenager, Bruce.
Oh, the comparisons, the the egos, the insecurity, all of the things that really can be damaging in a big way through that period of time. I thought that it was really important for me to kind of focus that chapter on folks like my daughters, right? So, if you're unique, that's what we should celebrate. And unfortunately, I think I start the chapter talking a lot about the comparisons and the Me Too's and all the not that affluence is bad, not in any way, but the comparison of that, or setting your self-worth based on other wealth or whatever you see around you is damaging, because that's not really what any of this is about at the end of the day. But it's easy to get caught up in that. So that chapter, unique, and thank God you're that way, is really how all those words kind of came together about celebrating the differences, right? Not every basketball team could win with a 6'8" player, right? You need someone who's got speed and a little less size and better ball control. Every factor goes into making an individual valuable.
Right. Well, this is the thing, and I'm going to read it because it says, be yourself. For today, be yourself, then repeat daily. Be is believe you are unique. Embrace your gifts. You are beautiful. Offer your spirit. Use your energy. Respect yourself. See possibilities. Expect the best. Live life as a blessing. Forgive, forget, and forge onward. And, again, we were talking about this, and I think it's so important because in the world in which we live, especially for adolescents, and even a lot of adults, they want to be like everybody else. They don't realize that their uniqueness is their power. And because they don't realize that, they're really pushing their gifts and talents way down so they can be like everybody else in the group. And that's the opposite of what we should be doing. And I just think I love the whole entire book. And I think that there's so much positive impact for anyone and everyone that picks it up. But I will recommend that that's where you start. Start on chapter 9, then go to chapter 8, and then read whatever else you want to read. But at the beginning of the book, Bruce, you talk about Mark Twain. You actually have a quote from Mark Twain, and we've got that because this is one of my favorite quotes as well. And that quote is, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. So tell us about the day that you were born, and also tell us about the day that you found out why.
Okay, well, back in the day, when my mother was pregnant with me and expecting me, the night she went into labor, what ultimately that labor caused was, in medical terms, a dissecting aortic aneurysm during labor. So, in a nutshell, her arteries, one of the most important ones, ripped open on the inner wall, and she was bleeding between the inner wall and the exterior wall. And from what I understand from some of my dear medical friends, when that happens, most of the time there's a bleed out, and there's very little that can be done unless the patient these days is either treated immediately, or it's noticed when they're in the hospital if it happens, that sort of thing. But back when my mother was pregnant with me, we were blessed to be at Yale New Haven Medical Center, and there were two surgeons who were doing research and perfecting aortic valve replacement. And those two surgeons were called over to, the OBGYN delivered me, and then they immediately, for the next 6 weeks, went to work on trying to save her life. And she was the second survivor on record to live longer than 72 hours after this type of event, where the mother was pregnant and had a dissecting aortic aneurysm. So that was the day I was born. She made a full recovery after 3 experimental heart surgeries. She lived a full and active life with a very positive and expectant day every day. We all have our moments, but I don't remember it being anything but a blessing in her mind that she was alive, and she lived until I was 22 years old. So her passion for life and her positivity melded with my father's love of words. So that was the day I was born, right? Was day.
And when's your birthday, Bruce? We got to know that.
It's April 8th.
Okay. Oh, so it's coming up.
It is. It is. Yeah, 29 again.
Yeah.
So when the job thing happened and all of that, and then the word started coming, that was just clear to me that was the why.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand all of the medical aspect. I didn't understand necessarily you're only raised in your own family, so you don't have too much outside of that beyond relatives and close friends. But I didn't really realize at that moment the type of environment I was raised until I was called on to use it, if that makes sense.
Right, of course.
The appreciation.
Right. I think we all do that. We don't realize what we have. And for myself too, with my dad being a professional tennis player, he poured personal development into our brains. And when I left to go to college, I'm looking around saying, why don't these people know this? I mean, what's the deal? How come somebody hasn't taught them? The basic winning mindset is what I call it. So I do think that we don't realize what other people's journeys have been and the impact that the environment that they grow up in makes on their lives. And I think it's amazing. And, for me personally, one of the things that happens on a daily basis, and I'm sure this happens to you too as well, Bruce, is I've got people that will either text me, they call me, they're clients of mine, they send in videos, they just ask questions. And I love to ask questions myself. I mean, listen, if I get you, and I did this actually to Bruce at the TED Talks, if I get you in a corner, I'm going to ask you about 50 questions because I want to learn from other people. But every week I have an Ask Jen's question, Bruce, and I'm going to answer this, but I want you to answer this as well. And I try my best to align the question with our show topic. And this actually came to me this weekend from somebody that, oh my goodness, her and her family have been going through something, and it's challenging because that's what life happens. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be difficult and challenging, but this was the question that she asked me. She said, Jens, how do you get up after falling down? I mean, after doing something that you didn't expect to have happen. And, sometimes things happen to you and they were decisions that you didn't make that somebody else made, and you're in a position where you're down. And I said, number one, you have to always remember that triumph starts with the conscious decision that you are going to win and prevail at everything in life. And that decision has to have been made prior to be stronger. Now, you can still make the decision after it happens, but realize that triumph and success happens with the decision. Number two is you have to control the chatter in your brain. To what we have been talking about all show is the chatter that you have in your brain is going to make you or break you. And that chatter, you've got to realize, is if it's positive, it's going to help you. If it's not positive, it's going to pull you down. And the third thing I said to her is you have to hitch your wagon to real leaders. You've always got to associate with people that are going to lead you in the right direction. And I don't know about you, Bruce, but your book is going to lead people in the right direction. So for you, how would you answer that question?
Well, I think number one, you can't define. And again, none of this stuff is easy. Let's back up for a second if we can. We talked kind of about the adolescence and all the comparison and uniqueness and all that kind of stuff. I want to make sure that I'm pretty clear that I understand that this is not easy, and often it is a struggle. So yes, that would kind of be the framework. But number one, I would say the circumstances are not who you are. They are the circumstances. Yes, maybe we had something to do with getting into those circumstances, but that they're not what define you. How you work to deal with the circumstances is a big first step to me.
Right.
So a layoff. Okay. I could say, well, and I did, of course, because it wasn't, you're kidding me, right? It's not me. You must have met somebody else. And you deny it, and then you ultimately have to get through all that stuff, but it happens. So number one is it was a situation that was not completely in my control, but what I can control is how I respond. Number one. So how do you get down? How do you get back up when you fall down? Well, don't blame the step you tripped over, or don't blame the wire that crossed your feet made you fall. And I know that's metaphorically speaking, but get away from the cause as quickly as you can. Number one. Number two, and I had to do this, and I still do, and I truly believe in incrementalism, which means you might want to climb the mountain, but it has to start with one step repeated 20,000 times. Mm-hmm. It's not a 20,000 step move.
Right.
So incremental steps, I would say, would be another aspect to it. And the other is refuse to quit.
Right.
I mean, so I work with a lot of, young sales teams and such. And I can't, you get this comment sometimes, well, I can't call and ask for that. And I said, well, all right, it's already a no. So we're done. So they haven't talked to you yet. So just things about refusing when you want to quit to stop then.
Right. I
doesn't mean it's going to go forever, but give yourself so I did this train for a 10K race, and I had never really run before. So I got the shoes and all that stuff, and I was ready to roll, and I go out to the end of the driveway, and I go, okay, it's 10K, 6.2 miles. All right, there's a telephone pole 60 feet up in front of me. Let's see if I can make it to that. Okay, and how about one more? And then one more, and then one more. Okay, that's enough. And then you start the next day. So incrementally staying committed to the commitment that every time you fall, you will get back up. Because if you do get back up, you don't lose.
That's right. And that's how I do my runs, and that is how I ski also. I don't look all the way down the mountain. I just look a little bit ahead of me and say, okay, I can make it to that point. I can make it to that point. But that's really what you have to do in life. It's the little steps that you do on a daily basis with that commitment. That's how it happens. Now, every show, to the best of our ability, we have a laughter is the best medicine, because I truly believe that you've got to laugh, and laughter truly is the best medicine. There are so many physiological benefits to laughter. And again, I try to do my best to align it with our topic of the day. So let's roll the laughter is the best medicine video.
Bro, no, looks like things incorrectly. Loose voititium. Veloué sizzle. A people Kader vine jar. Boss. Calagas fruits TD flockus. Proto and Vegeta blaze incorrectly. Kakarats. Zucchini. Latunchi. Edgy planet. Cabage. Asparagus. Got that broccoli titty. We at Houlihan. What y'all eating? What's on the menu? Steak and Robus. Boobilis. Dorinicus. Bootyless. Winnigans and Tentacus are people to Zaire San player. Prono and fruites incorrectly. Pen of peoples. Papaya. Bananas. Cantilla poops. Champagne man juice. What the? We out here at the Cannes Film Festival. Laban Quay Postali. Escargots. Les Nigasians. Literal Grundig. Pidgeot. These Petits. Prono and things incorrectly. Play yes, girl. Anthropo. Jawalrus. Combi. Prono and things incorrectly. Biscuits. Yeah. Reciprocus. What's in the max real? Booty. Pronos and things incorrectly. Categories, categories. Architecture. Double banana grains. Rampage. Pronos and things incorrectly. Occasion. Kupakakis. Eucenery. Record red. Q-table. Pronos and things incorrectly. Udabay. Stumblupon. Jamil.
Okay, so I love this, Bruce, and this guy's name is Chaz Smith, and I thought, okay, Bruce has got to meet Chaz because y'all have this fascination with words, and I love it how he puts this whole twist on it to make it funny, because we got to laugh. We have totally got to laugh. So put this guy's name on your list of reaching out to, because I think it would be an amazing strategic partnership, and I'm not kidding about that. So, before we close up, I think we can't not talk about Tammy Kling. Tammy Kling is the person that introduced Bruce and I together. She owns On Fire Books. She's an incredible person. And it really, to me, when we talk about the signature event that I do every year, and it's typically the very last weekend in April, the first weekend in May. And this year it's going to be May 4th, and it's called Beauty, Brains, and Business. Our overarching goal for the event this year is creating winning life teams. So for the beauty energy portion of it, we're going to be talking about self-care, self-love. We've got an incredible physician by the name of Dr. Lee. He is board certified in 5 different specialties, and I'm telling you right now, it's going to be incredible. And I think, Jason, we've got a graphic, because we've got some other incredible sponsors. And as the sponsors in our event people grow, we are going to be adding that to it, because Dr. Lee is actually the physician and medical director there at Advanced Surgical Arts. But we've got Christy Phillips, who is our So Very Christy, I co-host her show. Rita Worthen, that's an incredible graphic artist, as well as photographer, Shamika and Co. We've got probably about 5 or 6 more people that are coming on board, and Tammy Kling may be one of those. But one of the things that I think that Bruce and I both agree with, and this is something that Tammy Kling preaches all the time, is you have got to have a life team of people that are committed to your success. So Bruce, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your heart with us. Thank you, Tammy Kling, for inviting us. And before we say bye to you, Bruce, is there any last parting words that you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I would just like to say, Jens, thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully there's some tools, some actual real things that the listeners can latch on to. And, I would just encourage them to pick a word. This is one of the things I do in my workshops, which not workshops, I call them workshops. One of the things we do is an exercise where I ask the attendees to pick a word that's meant something to them in their life that's been powerful, and write it down, and then use just the letters of the word and try to define it for themselves. It somewhat blossoms the words for me, and I've gotten such great feedback from folks that I like to encourage folks to just sit down and maybe do that on a 3x5 card or a Post-it note, and then put it somewhere. The word might be thrive, it might be courage, it's whatever word you want to latch onto, and try to bring some meaning to it just by using the letters.
Okay, so I've got an awesome idea. It just popped into my head, and when I have this happen, it means I need to do it. So at that event, our Beauty Brains in Business event on March 4th, I'm going to do that, Bruce. I'm going to get note cards. I'm going to have everybody do that. And we're going to take pictures of that, and we're going to hashtag you. We're going to hashtag the event. And we're going to also hashtag the title of your book, because I think that's an amazing, amazing activity. So thank you for inspiring that and sharing that. And thank you so much for coming on. So for all of you out there, please, if there's one thing that you took away from the show today, please share this. Share the show, share the message, share the golden nugget. Help make this world a better place, one kind act at a time. And until we meet again next Monday at 3 p.m., be big, be bold, and most importantly, be you. Bye-bye.